Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in for this week's warm-up. Last week I talked about doing some free-form chord progressions on your own. If that was a bit much for you, I'm going to tone it down a little this week and talk about analyzing a piece of music that already exists. It's not that hard, especially if you have something short like the passage we're going to address in Reichert's Daily Studies. This one is number 5 from his Opus 5 warm-ups, which I've posted below. And I'm just going to analyze the one in C major. So why would you want to analyze music? There's lots of reasons. Mentally, I think it's just good for your confidence. It's not healthy to have that fear or blind spot in your musical life where you're terrified if someone asks you, what chord is this? Another reason would be the physical reasons. So many of our predecessors have given us these exercises, whether they're etudes or daily exercises, that go through a similar group of chord progressions. The reason that that is important is because we can practice ahead of time the balance of the flute, some complex fingerings, we can work on our physical tension, we can work on breathing, we can work on our tone. And then there's some practical considerations. Getting these progressions in your ear can help you prepare music more quickly and efficiently, and also help you sight read music, because as soon as you hear the chord progression coming, you can already jump ahead to the next thing so that you're always a measure at least ahead of where you're actually playing. So we're going to start today in C major. The first thing I do when I'm analyzing a piece of music is I look through to be sure that I'm in the key I think I'm in. In this case, we have 2 4-bar phrases or 1 8-bar phrase with 2 halves, however you want to think about it. So the first thing I would do is play through the piece and see where I thought the harmonies sounded like they were shifting. The second thing I would do is do a pitch inventory of each measure. I could do that on a piece of paper, or I could do that in my head, or I could do that on my flute. However you do it, you're going to make note of how many times each pitch happens in the measure. You only count each pitch class 1 time. So the first measure, C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E, G. So it's C, E, G. The second measure is a little more tricky. I see a D and an F that are both line notes, but then I see 2 space notes, a G and a B. If I rearrange those pitches so that they are either all lines or all spaces, that will help me line up my chord so I can figure out what the root of the chord is. In this case, if I took the top 2 space notes, move them down an octave, now here's the secret. Anytime you see or hear this chord, it's a G major chord with an extra note 7 above the bottom. That distance from the G to the F is the 7th, and in this case it's a minor 7th. In a G major scale it would be an F sharp, so in this case it's a half step smaller than we would expect for a major scale. So that is a G major minor 7th. That quality is the quality of all dominant 7th chords. So anytime you see that quality, even if it's outside of the key that you're currently in, you can recognize it. The next chord is the same pitches, it's just in a slightly different rotation. And then the last measure, we go back to the tonic triad. If you want to get fancy with these chords, you can talk about the position that they're in. Here's a list that I give to my students about which position chords are in. So if we go back to that chord in the second measure, the D is the lowest pitch. So that sounds like a dominant 7th chord that's in second inversion. In other words, it's a G, B, and it's got D on the bottom. The second measure, I'll give you a second to figure it out yourself. It's got a B on the bottom. So in this rotation of the chord, the 3rd of the chord is the lowest pitch, so it's in first inversion, which for a 7th chord we notate with Arabic numeral 6-5. Moving to the second line, the harmonic motion increases. All that means is the chords happen more frequently. The way that I figured out the second chord is I rotated through exactly as I explained for the second measure of the piece, but the pitches that I got were E, G sharp, B, D. When I play that, that's a dominant seventh chord. If you get really good at recognizing it, you'll see them everywhere. If this is a dominant seventh chord, it would be scale degree 5. That would mean that E is scale degree 5. E, F, G, A. So 5, 6, 7, 1 if I count up my scale. This chord belongs in an A scale. I'm not sure yet if it's A major or A minor because both scales that start on A natural would have this exact same dominant seventh chord. In a minor scale, we would add a leading tone, G sharp, so that would be the same quality. And A major would already have a G sharp and A minor would add a G sharp. So this is a dominant seventh chord of 6. And if I'm right, the very next chord should be an A chord. And it is. It's an A minor chord. And in the scale of C major, C, D, E, F, G, A is scale degree 6. So that is what we call an applied dominant. Sometimes it's also called a secondary dominant. So we give scale degree 6 its own dominant chord, its own private dominant chord. The next chord is one that's a little odd. What Reichert has done in this example is he's taken a diminished 2 chord from the minor scale, C minor, and he's just kind of cut and pasted it and dropped it in. If you rearrange the pitches, you'll see that it's D, F, A flat. So when you see accidentals that lie outside of the key, it could mean that you have an applied chord that's coming from a different key signature, or it could mean that you just have a chromatic passing tone, or it could also mean, like in this case, that you're taking a chord from somewhere else and dropping it in. The following 2 chords are our interlocked cadential 6/4 chord. I do tend to mix up. Sometimes I say it's a 5 chord, sometimes I say it isn't. In this case, I've called it a 1 chord, a tonic triad in second inversion. And that is literally what it is. But this always happens at a cadence, so it has the nickname cadential 6/4 chord because it's interlocked with the 5 chord. It sounds like part of the 5 chord, and then we resolve the 5 chord, which is a dominant 7th chord. It has an F in it, and then we go to a 1 chord. Quickly going through A minor, we actually have the same exact chord progression for the first line. In the second chord of the second line in A minor, we have a bunch of pitches. If I took a pitch inventory and I said the names of the notes, it's C sharp, E, G, B flat. If I play that, this is stacked minor thirds. The place this tends to happen is on scale degree 7. And if I pretend C sharp, E, G, B flat, the bottom of that note, if it is the leading tone, then the next chord should be something to do with D. Does C sharp resolve up in the next chord? And it does. It resolves up to a D, and the following chord is D, F, A, which is a 4 chord in first inversion in minor. Our Roman numerals for major scales and minor scales are different, but they're always consistent unless the scale is altered with chromatic addition. So looking at the pitches in this measure, I see DFA, then I see BDF. I could analyze this whole measure as BDFA and call it a 2/7 chord, but the reason I didn't is because in the example of major at the exact same spot, Reichert did use 2 separate chords. So the following 2 chords are the interlocked cadential 6/4, going to the 5/7, going to the 1 chord. So I hope knowing these chords consciously as you're doing your warm-up will help you make a lot of progress in your flute life. Thanks for watching.